From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi again. Welcome to Chicago Newsroom. I'm Ken Davis. So, you really have to wonder sometimes, why would any self-respecting human being want to be a Chicago alderman? I mean, statistically speaking, rubber stampism has reached unprecedented and dizzying heights. Aldermen get blamed for rampant violence in our streets. They have to sign off on odious stuff like red light cameras. They don't even get to control garbage collection the way they used to. So what's the point? Well, the distinguished alderman of the 33rd Ward had some clear-eyed insight the other day into Hal that's what he gave to Hal Dardick and Dennis Byrne over at the Tribune. Dick Mell said, and I quote from right here, "The jobs that I really thought were the great ones were the bridge tender jobs. At one time, we had 3 people on every bridge. I put 4 kids through college as bridge tenders. I would get them on the second shift from 3 to 11 where they could do their homework, or 11 to 7 where they'd sleep, and they were getting electrician's pay, and it was great." Maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself with the interpretation here, but that's kind of where he was going. So he said, anyway, we had all these great jobs from the city, and I put a couple kids through college with them, but the best part was parking tickets. Remember when you could non-suit a parking ticket? Stacks of parking tickets, they'd non-suit them. It was great. You could make lots of friends. So there you are. You want to be an alderman? That's why the answer is you get to make a lot of friends. And we're not talking Facebook here. These cushy electrician jobs up in the bridge houses have gone away, but don't you think there are still some other jobs like second shift red light camera watcher or big box store finder that are still putting aldermanic offspring through college today? Well, here to help us figure out those important questions and even more important questions are Ben Joravsky of the distinguished Chicago Reader, distinguished Ben Joravsky of the Chicago Reader,
the Reader's distinguished,
and the distinguished Sarah Karp of the distinguished Catalyst. 2 old friends of the show. Glad to have you here. At the same time, I don't think we've had you on together before,
no.
So this ought to be
This
interesting.
is really first.
I want to obviously talk CPS in schools because you guys talk CPS in schools lots, and we do on here. So the 3 of us together ought to have a few things to kick around. But we do also have our governor who has decided that he has the authority to just tell people they can't get paid anymore.
Right.
And whether that's true or not, we'll certainly want to kick around Pat Quinn, because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
And we have a special city council session coming up on July 17th to ban assault weapons again in Chicago. That'll help, I'm sure. And
that's our mayor.
and also, I want to promise from both of you that we're going to figure out a way to squeeze all this in today. Squeezy the pension python. I want to talk about the Tribune and what they're doing with spinning off their newspapers, because it's like
tax stuff there.
Yeah, I mean, are they setting it up? Okay, we'll get to that later. But
I'm not a tax attorney.
Yeah. But they have plenty over at the Tribune. Yeah. Okay, now we have a quote-unquote billion-dollar deficit at the Chicago Public Schools. You guys have both reported on that. We've talked about it endlessly on this program. And even Greg Hines of Cranes, who sat in this chair last week, the great Greg Hines, said that I believe he used the word con, that actually the number isn't even close to $1 billion. And now you're reporting that we're even closer because they've cut $600 million from the central office. So what is going on with this budget, and why isn't there toilet paper at the elementary schools on the southwest side?
Well, one thing that I'll say is that it can't possibly be that much, and even Chicago Public School officials have sort of acknowledged it, because what they're saying is that they can balance the budget. They know exactly how they're going to balance the budget, and they're going to be doing it by draining the one-time cash reserves, which is also a little bit odd because last year they drained the one-time cash reserves. So they've been replenished because a magical thing happened. The Cook County paid their property taxes on time, which actually is a very odd thing because I don't really understand how that gives you reserves. It seems like it might help with cash flow, but that it would be that it would help you with reserves, but they know how they're going to balance their budget. And in fact, I've talked to some board members, and I've asked them just point blank, if the pension reform is passed, or if you get some pension relief, will you raise the school budgets? And they've said pretty definitively that they will not. So why we're even thinking that attaching these two things, I'm not sure.
I still don't understand it. I mean, I'm certainly not smart enough to understand big numbers like that. But you know, it's sort of like, it's kind of like having a checkbook or something, right? I mean, money comes in and money goes out.
Well, the whole purpose of throwing out $1 billion, which by the way is everybody's favorite number.
Yes.
Like we got to get $1 billion for the parking meters.
Right.
Back when they sold them, and now we're going to save $1 billion on the parking meters now that we raised everybody's the fares, or at least the hours that you have to pay. Now $1 billion deficit. They throw those numbers out, in my humble opinion, Kenneth, in order to justify doing whatever they want to do. In terms of cuts, in terms of taking away the teachers' raise, in terms of closing schools, in terms of funneling contracts to charter schools. So if you're under the threat of this imminent bankruptcy of $1 billion, and $1 billion is a nice big number that even readers of Chicago's IQ could understand. I don't mean to insult everybody.
No, you don't insult everybody.
No, well, everybody who voted for this mayor. But anyway, so if you throw that number out there, then it's, well, it's $1 billion deficit. Of course, we can't afford toilet paper at Von Steuben High School. Of course, we have to cut teachers at the schools on the Southwest side. So I don't believe that if you had the board members sit down and take a lie detector test, that they would pass the detector test by saying there was $1 billion budget.
That's a very creative way of saying you think the board members are lying.
Yes. Well, that lying is always a tough word, as we were saying earlier. That I don't know. What is that? Where Reagan, he didn't know things.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like plausible deniability.
Plausible. Right. So I will get off of this, but you have to help me understand this. Springfield, as we all know, failed at passing any kind of quote-unquote pension reform, whatever that means. I will set that aside for a different discussion. If they had succeeded, how would that have impacted or affected the Chicago Public Schools budget, and would Von Steuben have toilet paper?
In the short term, I don't think it would, unless it was just a straight pension holiday. I mean, you might have some relief this year if you put the pension over a longer period of time or things like that. But even let's say you paid $400 million this year, if we have $1 billion deficit, then you still have a $600 million deficit, which is pretty substantial anyways. The real reason why the schools are seeing cuts, I believe, is that they want to make these schools more efficient. They think that they can get by giving them this per pupil that is, it's standardized across the district. And I think before, if you would have looked at how the per pupil played out, it varied a lot. And so by standardizing it, you're going to see...
saying that each school now has a budget that's determined by the number of kids they have in the school.
Right. So the thing that I think happened over time is that even though you might have had formulas that determined how schools were getting their budgets, you also had a lot of times that they'd get special programs, they'd have a grant, that one person would come on, that one person wouldn't be fired. There'd be a lot of extras at every school, not just North Side schools, not just South Side schools. And by doing this standard per pupil budget, we've equalized things. And I think that, Tim Cawley, who's a chief administrative officer, he knew darn well this was going to happen. There would be a lot of cuts. And I think that he just thinks that schools need to be more efficient, and I think this is his way of making it. I really don't think that it has that much to do with the so-called deficit. I mean, we have a deficit every single solitary year.
That evaporates the night before they pass the budget.
That's
usually.
right, and come the audit, the yearly audit, we almost always have a surplus. So much for our deficit. I mean, you think at least once we'd come out with an actual negative.
Yeah. So is it possible that the schools aren't really going to be terribly negatively impacted by these cuts? I mean, didn't David Vitale say something the other day about, this is really kind of crazy, guys. It's only like 1 or 2%.
Well, that's easy for him to say. He's not a principal trying to meet a budget. He's not a parent sending his kid to that school that's getting cut. He's not a kid in the school. He's not a teacher in the school. So it's very easy for David Vitale to minimize the impact of the cuts that everybody else is facing, just as it's very easy for Tim Cawley to pretend that cutting budgets is making things more efficient. So, I mean, the people who run our Chicago public schools, live in a world far removed from the actual reality of the people who have to either work or attend Chicago public schools.
Yeah.
And so it's all talking points to them. So yes, it's very easy for Vitale to say that, but in reality, we already didn't have the investment in our Chicago public schools that we ought to have. If you compare the great schools of the Chicagoland area, like New Trier, where the mayor went, or the lab school where his children go, or Parker, or Latin, they spend far more money per pupil than the Chicago public schools, and they're not talking about cutting their budgets next year. They're not talking about increasing their class size. So if we have a model for what's really great and effective education, which is where the outstanding schools of the system live, then we should apply that to the Chicago public schools and not pretend as though you can have the same results if you starve, financially speaking, your public school system, in my humble opinion.
Your opinion's always humble. One of the other issues, and the Chicago Sun-Times editorial board took this issue on a couple of days ago, and something that you've been pushing, Ben, for a long time, is that there is some degree of surplus in the TIF funding that's been accumulating over the last 20 years or whatever it is that TIFs have been around, and that maybe that money ought to get plowed back into the school system since so much of it was taken from the schools in the first place. But the Sun-Times reasons that there isn't that much in the fund anyway, and that it would be a one-time fix, which is something that activists and journalists like you always decry when Mayor Daley would try to take money from some big pot and use it once to fix the problem. So how do you respond?
I actually don't know if I personally decried any of those machinations, although I did decry selling off the parking meters, and then he was going to set that fund up to last forever, and then but within 2 or 3 years,
it almost lasted forever.
So I think I was decrying that.
Right.
I'm really decrying the Sun-Times editorial board the last few weeks or so, because they've just been, in my humble opinion, again, repeating talking points that they get from Mayor Emanuel's press office. We don't know how much money is in these TIF reserves. There's two issues, by the way. I could easily I find myself just going into TIF land.
Oh, go ahead. If you can't do it on this show, then where can you do it, right? Go ahead.
Okay, all right, well, whatever.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Ben Joravsky, Unchained.
Right.
So I feel like Carlos Santana, about ready to go off on a guitar solo.
Come on, give us your best solo.
Yeah, all right. Or Hendrix.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so there's the $457 million a year that flies out the window into the TIF fund, which half of which is a tax that the people of Chicago think they're paying for schools, when in fact they're paying to go to the TIF.
All right, I'm going to stop you from time to time here. Just $457 million. That's how much money we as Chicagoans all kick into the TIF fund.
That is correct, Senator. That's the latest numbers for this calendar year, 2013. Just breaking news.
But when I look at my tax bill that I just got, I don't see anything in there about my TIF contribution.
Of course not, because your tax bill lies. I could use that word. And if you live in a TIF district, it says you pay zero. It's one of the great cons. I don't know why this isn't fraud. Your official statement from the county pointing out how you spend your taxes tells you something that's false. So I don't know how they get away with that year after year, but they do. So anyway, so $457 million goes to the various TIF bank accounts. And then the issue is how much of that money, which is left over from year to year as unspent. Mm-hmm. And if you count the budgets, the annual budgets, each TIF every year has an annual budget. So if you were to go through 160 of those budgets and count up the reserves that they claim are sitting in a fund, you get $1.7 billion as of 2011. I know this because there have been some reformers, Tom Tresser's group, who've actually gone through and counted them. The city is now claiming that in actuality, even though the annual reports say there's $1.7 billion in reserves, that money has been committed to projects.
Okay.
What projects it's been committed to, they won't tell us. Those projects are not itemized in the annual reports. So it's.
And you think you have the right to know that? And I'm just asking.
No, I don't have the right to know that at all. I don't know. Don't even send me any more tax statements. Anyway, just spend the money. So in other words,
you're getting awfully righteous on us here. Yeah.
I know it's really horrible that I would like to know how my money is spent. So the reality is that it's one of those things where we're just going to have to take the mayor at his word for it. That the budgets, the annual budgets say there's 1.7 billion, but he says no. In reality, we've already committed all that to projects that I haven't specified, but don't ask too many questions.
So how much is left?
Well, I'm going, the budgets, the annual reports say 1.7 billion.
I thought it was more like 15 million. I thought I had seen the number. There was only like 15 million available, and that really wouldn't do much for the schools.
No, it wouldn't.
If you gave it all to the schools.
There's 1.7 billion in the bank account, but he's claiming that I've committed that to unspecified projects. So when all is said and done, there's only 15 million for your schools.
I see.
That's generally how things go in Chicago. When all is said and done, there's very little for the
public. So that's kind of
schools.
the obverse of the $1 billion deficit. There's no money.
Right. And
exactly.
I think, though, the bigger question is, should we be spending money on these projects and not on the schools? I mean, the whole idea of TIF is that the money is going to improve the neighborhood, by investing in it. But if the school's downhill, the neighborhood is not going to be very good anyways. So, and it's going to be hard to sustain itself. So I think that the more fundamental question is, is the whole idea of how TIFs work really, really valid? In a lot of circumstances, it's the place isn't blighted, and we're spending all this money, improving it, and how is that helping the schools? And
Don't go too far down this, or Ben's going to start talking about that stadium.
The stadium, which they're having a protest today, the DePaul, against the DePaul Stadium. I think that just made people.
I went to Northeastern. Northeastern doesn't have a stadium.
No, they don't.
Why don't we get a $50 million stadium downtown?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. Maybe Northeastern's president doesn't have private meetings with Mayor Rahm. That is truly, okay, Ken, I'll restrain myself. I won't go on a Santana-like riff. But that is truly the dumbest idea that I've seen coming out of City Hall in at least 10 years. So that's quite a statement. I think selling the parking meters was beyond this and dumbness. Okay, second dumbest.
Well, there's always the airport and the lake, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that was in the early 90s, so I said 10 years.
It goes back that far. Okay, we aren't ever going to solve the CPS budget issue. We know that, but actually, I think I understand it a little better than I did 20 minutes ago, and I hope you do too. By the way, all right. So let's move on. What is this Pat Quinn thing? That's the question. What is this Pat? What is he doing?
I mean, I don't know. Does he really think that this is going to change the discussion on pensions? I can't imagine. Though I do think that most people in the public do think that the lawmakers need to figure out something with the pension. I think that's why he's doing it, because he knows the public is on his side.
Well, you know who he's playing very successfully to? The people who live in the sewers of the chat boards on the Tribune and Sun-Times websites. Those folks who never have anything good to say, they seem to like what I've seen so far today. They seem to like this idea. So
no, I'm actually I never thought I'd say this. I'm seeing eye to eye with the people who dwell in those sewers on this one, because I mean, poor Pat Quinn. It's like nothing is going to get of significance is going to get passed in the state of Illinois because of these machinations having to do with the governor's election race, which is going to happen next year. So they don't want, they couldn't even get gay marriage through because they didn't want Quinn to get credit for that. All right, be the one who signed the bill. So they couldn't get that. We're the most liberal state in the union, or one of the most liberal states. We don't have gay marriage because they don't want Quinn to get credit for it. So he finally gets, I'm sick and tired of this. I'll show you. I won't pay you. And I think that a lot of people are like, yeah, don't pay them. That's the first thing my government has ever done that I agree with. Don't pay them.
You want to talk about a way to save some money?
Let's do it for the aldermen and the Board of Education and Mayor Rahm.
Well, it's really almost kind of pointless to speculate about whether this will work or not, because obviously this will go to court or whatever it will. But what I thought was interesting this morning was that Madigan actually kind of quietly, quietly may not be the right word, but sort of softly endorsed the idea of holding payback, obviously because I'm sure he thinks that that means that more people will climb on board his pension plan.
Well, I also think that it's probably popular across the board that there's always this level of frustration in the public where throw all the bums out.
Yeah.
So don't pay the bums.
Right.
And so to stand up and say, no, I want to get paid, even though we're not doing anything of consequence.
Yeah. The problem with this is that it doesn't really stand up to rigorous scrutiny. I mean, it's sort of like once your lizard brain response has said, yeah, good for you, Pat, then you start thinking about, well, okay, can you think of a legislator who would say, oh, geez, if you're not going to pay me, then I'll switch my vote? I mean, is that really going to happen?
Well, I mean, you're applying logic to this whole thing. We just got off the TIF discussion where they lie about everything. So now you're trying to be logical when it comes to this issue.
It's the lying
selective logic here.
All right, I want to talk about the Tribune. We got a few minutes here.
My favorite newspaper.
Yeah, I mean, we are media creatures. Oops, that's I think that's copyrighted term, but we are creatures of the media, all of us.
Okay.
Is the Tribune doing? Okay, what they've done is they've created a separate company and spun the newspapers into that company, all their newspapers, right? Now, are they doing that so that they can just make them just putting a nice big bow on them so they can sell them to the Koch brothers, or are they doing this because they actually think they might be able to run it as a business and they want it to be separate from their TV stations?
From what I've heard from other media people,
from other media
right?
Yeah.
Is that it's because they think it'll be easier to sell them as a little entity of newspapers, because I guess the revenue model is so different from broadcast to print that they just think that will be an easier sell. I guess as a person in the media, I'm praying that somebody decent comes in and buys them and buys the newspapers. I think it could be a good thing, but if it's it depends who it is. I might want to get a job from them one day, so I don't want to criticize them too much. But let's just say, I hope that people are good people and share the values.
I was thinking that if the value keeps coming down, maybe Catalyst and the Reader could pony up some money and buy the Tribune,
I was
the
thinking
joint
of
venture.
buying it. I'm a home subscriber, by the way. I mean, I just throw that out there.
Good for
the
you.
Tribune, I get it every day.
Yeah.
There's got to be some kind of tax avoidance thing going on here when they, and
smarter people than us.
Yes, I will figure this
right,
out.
right.
You sell it, so then maybe you try to when you sell it to whoever you sell it to, they pick up the tax burden, so it lowers the price. I mean, I don't know. I know it's not because they're trying to promote good journalism that they're doing this. Let's just put
it's
that
not?
in. No,
okay,
I hate to
that's
burst your bubble there.
to me.
Yeah. I'm sure it's all about sales price and taxes and that kind of thing.
Okay, all right. We have a couple minutes left. You want to talk sports in an obscure way? There's some kind of an agreement on Cubs Park, maybe, for the signs.
Oh, is that sports? That's
yeah.
more
To me, that's the closest we get to sports on this show.
Yeah. So I thought you were going to ask me about Bobby Hull.
No. Or Justin Bieber.
No, I
were you offended by Justin Bieber standing on the?
No, but I've got my own issues with the Blackhawks, which are kind
I
of
thought you were saying you got
out.
your own issues with Justin Bieber.
No, I don't have any issues with Justin Bieber. So no, the whole Cub thing is such a fascinating little drama. I love watching it from afar, and they're eventually going to figure out a way to have the public subsidize this, probably through changing a landmark, giving it a landmark designation, which enables them to avoid paying property taxes. So I've always believed that what they're doing is they're trying to figure out how they can plausibly foist this on the public in a way that the public believes that this is revenue neutral. And
maybe they get those same tax experts at the Tribune.
Right.
The Tribune, the TIF guys, you get them all together, get the Board of Education number crunchers in a room. And then, of course, the people of Chicago will then just reelect everybody anyway, so it doesn't
what
matter.
you seem to be saying, if there's a theme to today's show, it's that it's not always what it appears to be.
That is correct.
Yeah.
In fact, it's often exactly what it doesn't appear to be.
Yeah. Do we have time to get? I'm not sure if we have. We got about a couple of minutes left. Okay. let's hit this city council special session that's coming up on July 17th. No, of course,
when a special session of the city council. Why?
When the state legislature has a special session, everybody goes to Springfield. They all get paid extra.
Yeah.
I don't know if the aldermen are going to get paid extra for a special session because I mean that means they have to come out of their aldermanic offices for. All right, so this actually is no joking matter because it's the whole issue about guns and how guns are to be handled in Chicago. They're going to increase the area around schools, I understand it, that where it's sort of a no-gun zone, and if you get caught with a gun, it's a mandatory sentence. There are lots of people who don't think mandatory sentences per se are the way to handle our problems. We already have no-gun zones around our schools, and then We're going to repass an assault weapons ban, I guess. I've just become so deeply cynical about all of this that I've actually come to a point where I just almost don't care. I mean, it just doesn't seem like anything matters in this issue.
And usually those safe zones around schools, what they really wind up doing is just getting a lot of times young kids in the neighborhood in prison for longer for holding a gun, which I'm not a proponent of a kid walking around with a gun, but a lot of times they not only are they mandatory sentences, but they transfer kids to adult court, and that doesn't seem to be a good thing for the kids, and it doesn't seem to be preventative at all. I mean, only 5% of all weapons used in Chicago are assault weapons, so I don't know. I mean, the truth is that we need to get rid of weapons, period. But now we have to do this concealed carry, which I don't think it's a good idea. But what can we do?
Yeah, I don't know. It's showboating to have a special session of the city council to pass this after. It didn't seem like anybody in the city of Chicago joined Pat Quinn in his attempt to make the concealed carry law more rigorous. Yeah. So it's just like. They don't show up to Springfield, the mayor and his aldermanic allies. They're out of the debate. They didn't exert any influence on that gun issue. They didn't exert any influence on the gay marriage. So now they're showboating for the people of Chicago who should be warned not to believe anything that they see in front of them. So that's how I view it, Ken. That's why I was laughing. I wasn't laughing at gun violence. I was laughing at the notion that we need a special session of the city council to do anything, as if they couldn't just wait another week and just do it anyway.
Well, I guess because of the timing that I don't really understand, but it's got to all be done within 10 days or something, and it wouldn't have been happen. But yeah, I mean, I have to say that the concept of a special session of the Chicago City Council is a pretty hilarious concept.
Special. This is really special as opposed to the usual.
And of course, we end on garbage because we found out that the $18 million we don't know for sure. It may not have even been saved after all that. And one of the things that I think is really kind of critical about that is that if you're going to reform garbage, you really have to reform like having extra people on the trucks and all those extra costs that weren't addressed in the grid. So we'll talk about that on our next discussion.
Very good.
It's been so much fun having you guys here. Thank you so much. Sarah Karp from Catalyst, Ben Joravsky from the Sun-Times Empire, the Reader,
Sun-Times.
part of the bright one. Thank you so much for being here. We'll convene this conversation again another time. You, though, have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV, which you can see anytime. But if you go to this address that you see right here, you can watch Chicago Newsroom anytime. I mean, like 3 o'clock in the morning, you can watch it. Help put you back to sleep. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week on Chicago Newsroom.